Hey fellas, welcome to part 1 of Testors 148 scale SR-71 build. I've been wanting to build this one for a while. This isn't a commission, this is for me. I may keep it, I may put it on eBay, I'm not sure. I'm going to put it in flight on a base, which should be cool. And I did add pilots. Take a look at those guys. Pew, pew, pew. They are from another kit because they don't supply you with pilots for this. And I had to do a little bit of alteration on their helmets because they don't wear the typical flight helmets. They've got like these astronaut type helmets. A lot of this video at the beginning, I'm just showing you how I rescribed the panel lines. I did something really cool for the camera glass, and I'll show you how I did that. Also show you how I'm kind of putting this together, gluing the parts together briefly. And the next episode, I'll cover some of the inaccuracies of the kit. Now, one inaccuracy is the nose, and it's really not that noticeable when I compare it to some pictures. I may or may not correct it, but this right here, I think call it the chimes, it comes out just a little bit wider on the real thing. Now, there are a few different noses that they used on the SR-71, and they were interchangeable. They'd pull one off, put another one on. But I don't know that it's going to be that big of an issue, but I may try to fix that. The tail end needs to be cut off, and then I can insert a few pieces of plastic card in there to make it look more accurate based on pictures. And you can buy aftermarket parts for this, but it's really expensive. The one thing that I do want to try to tackle is the exhaust, and this is the exhaust that they give you. I'm probably going to cut this out and deepen it and create my own little exhaust workings inside there, and I've seen that done online. Another thing are these little ramjet type dealios. Now, these aren't entirely accurate. I think the front's pretty good, but you can buy the aftermarket parts, and again, they're really expensive. But to be honest with you, you're not really going to notice it too much when it's in there like that. So I don't think I'm going to mess with that. So let's get on with the video, and if you're wanting to build this kit and kind of update it, I hope this helps you. Okay, one of the first things I want to do with this kit is rescribe the raised panel lines. With this being an older kit, an older Testors kit, and I found this to be the case in a lot of these older kits, is they've got these really awesome, cool kits that don't come from any other manufacturer, at least newer manufacturer, but they've got the raised panel lines. So I've already started tackling this, and I'm just going section by section. And when I put this together, I'm going to have to do sanding. I'm going to have to do a lot of other things that are going to obliterate some of my panel lines. But I want to get a good, I want to get this done ahead of time, because if I put it together first and have to do a lot of sanding, and which I think I'm going to have to do with this kit, I'm going to obliterate a lot of the raised panel lines, and then I'm going to have to pull up blueprints and try to find out where this panel line meets this one, and it's just easier to do it ahead of time, in my opinion. Now, there's a lot of sections to do, and there's a lot of different methods to do this. What I found is easiest for me, at least for most of the rescribing, is I'm using, for most of it, this little metal template, and I'm just using it as a straight edge. And especially for these shapes, these triangular shapes along the leading edges. And I've got my RB Production Scriber, which is the real fine one, because I don't want to overdo my panel lines like I did on the first one that I tried to build. So I'll take my straight edge and I'll put it right along here, and I'm going to start, and I'm not using a whole lot of pressure. I'm just wanting to get that first one done. Now, you don't want to be moving this. I'm not taping this down, so if I move my template, it's going to be hard lining it back up. And I want the depth of my panel lines to be equal. all of them to be equal. I don't want one that's 10 feet deep and then one that's, you know, a millimeter deep. So I'm going to go over each one 3 times with about the same amount of pressure. And you can see the little bitty shavings, okay? And I'm just going to keep doing this, and this is a fairly quick process, at least for these small sections here. Just line it up right along the raised panel line. I'm going to go 3 times with the same amount of pressure. And you want to make sure that point is butted up against that metal template. Now you can do this with Dymo tape like I've got here, but it takes a lot more time. And the Dymo tape isn't quite as accurate because it is softer. And this scribing tool has a tendency to bite into it. Now I will use it on longer sections like we've got here. Edge right here. And you want to make sure the panel lines connect, but you can take care of that in the next step. Okay? Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some 400 grit sandpaper, and I'm just going to knock these down because I've still got the raised panel lines there. I'm just going to smooth it out. And once you do this, you can pretty much tell if you got any errors in your scribing. I'm going to knock it down so it's all smooth. And I'm not real concerned with scratches. I mean, I'm using 400 grit. You could probably use something a little finer. But at this point, it's really not going to matter because I'm going to do some sanding, and I can come back with a real fine grit once I'm done. Give it a nice smoother finish. Get those any little scratches I got out, and then I'm going to prime it, and I'll probably end up sanding it with a fine grit sandpaper after I prime it as well. So I'm not going to be worried too much about scratches. And this isn't going to be a natural metal finish, so all those little bitty scratches that are left aren't really going to be noticeable anyway. Okay, now what I'm going to do, I can take my RB scriber back and go over them again just to clean out all this stuff. But I'm going to use this bigger one, my JTech tool. And I'm not going to push hard at all. Basically, all I'm doing, I'm not digging into the plastic. I'm just clearing out all that goop in there. And I just find this is a little bit easier to stay in line, just the way the tool's made. Stay within my panel line to clean out that goop. Hardly any pressure at all. I'm not digging into the plastic. I'm just cleaning out this panel line. Because if I go too deep, this particular scriber will give me a really deep and wide panel line, and I don't want that. I want to keep them all uniform, and I want to keep them nice and tight. And I'm just cleaning out that goop. Okay, and I forgot a panel line right there, so we're going to go ahead and scribe this in. Kind of went over. Okay, next what I'll do is I will take some isopropyl alcohol and a toothbrush. I'm going to clean out those lines, try to get any remaining remnants of my sanding and scribing out of those panel lines. Take a paper towel. Wipe it. Let that evaporate. And then I'm going to take my Mr. Cement S and I'm going to come along and run this along the panel line, and that's going to soften that up just a bit. Not much, but it's just going to take away some of the harshness of that, cutting that plastic. And I don't want to go over it more than twice with this stuff, because I don't want to put any other marks where this is going to melt the plastic, and I'll have to do more sanding if I melt the plastic and rub it in with the brush. So I just want to go over it once. Okay, and this stuff dries pretty quick, and that's all there is to it. Now, for these longer sections that I'm not going to be able to use my template, like this one right here, I'll use my Dymo tape, and I'll cut some off. And what I like to do with this Dymo tape is make two pieces out of it so I don't waste it. Yikes. Well, that's not a very straight cut, is it, fellas? It doesn't really matter because I'm going to use the straight portion. And the reason I cut this in half is because this tends to lose its stickiness after a few applications. So I will take my straight edge, the straight side. Let's use this side first. And I'm just going to come along here, get this crap out of the way. Okay. Then I'm going to take my scribing tool. Now it kind of turns right here, so this is where I'm going to start. And I'm just going to slowly come down, keeping it perpendicular. And there's a window there, so kind of has a tendency to maybe get offline at that point. Right there. I want to be careful scribing right there. Okay. Now it's kind of hard to tell, but there is a panel line there. And then I'll just repeat that process. I'll sand it, come back with my JTech tool, clean it out, and do the same thing. And it's as simple as that. Okay, if you followed my builds for any length of time, you know that I'm not real concerned with having pilots in my in-flight displays. But this one, I'm not exactly sure what kind of base I'm going to put it on. Whether, you know, I've kind of tossed around the idea of having it over a terrain, and in that case, I would really want pilots in it. So what I've done is I've taken a couple pilots from another kit, and I've sanded their helmets down and kind of made it into like a round ball, because the SR-71 pilot outfits or flight suits look more like an astronaut flight suit than anything else, and their helmets look like an astronaut helmet. So I've kind of shaved their helmet down. I've kind of cut their face off in places so it wasn't protruding out. And then I took some Magic Sculpt and I've put Magic Sculpt around the front of the face to fill it in. And I've just been taking my 800 grit Infinity sanding sponge and just kind of smoothing it out. Next, what I'll do is I'll take some Mr. Surfacer and kind of fill in some of these spaces that are kind of rough. And I want to make this perfectly, well, as close to perfectly round as I can. And again, you're not going to be able to see a whole lot inside, but I do want to give the appearance of that round astronaut type helmet. So I'm going to get some Mr. Surfacer on there. I'm going to get these all nice and smooth, and then I can put the arms on and start painting the pilots. Now the seats there's a lot left to be desired in these old Tester seats. So putting a pilot in there is going to solve the problem of having these crappy seats in there as well, because they're going to cover up most of that. So I'm going to get on with that and see you in a minute. Okay, now what I'm doing, this is kind of an effect that I don't get to use that often because I don't build a lot of newer jets. And on those, I sometimes like to put this clear nail, it's called nail film, N-A-I-L, or nail foil, I think. But it goes, I guess girls use it on their fingernails. They put fingernail polish on there and put it on. It gives kind of an iridescent look. I don't know. I don't do my fingernails that often. I'm going to have to start doing that, I guess. But I got these a while back, and I'll put these on the HUD screens in the cockpit, and it gives it a real neat iridescent sheen to it. And if you look at it like right here, you can see through it, there's not much of a difference. But when you put it up against a darker background, it really pops and really gives you a neat effect. Now, I haven't seen a lot of pictures of the windows for the cameras on the bottom of the SR-71. I did see in one particular picture that I saw, it looked like it kind of had this iridescent look to the cameras. So basically how I have fixed this, I just cut it into little shapes. It's real thin cellophane type stuff. I'll use Pledge Floor Care or Future, or whatever you want to call it. And I'll just brush it on, and this is going to kind of act as my clear glue. And then I just lay my film over it. Take a Q-tip, kind of smush it down. Now when that dries, it's basically going to glue this real thin film to the clear parts. Now when you look at this through the glass, it doesn't look like it's really changing much. But let me show you what it looks like. I've already done the front camera window, and as you can see, you can still see through it. But when I put it up against the black background, it really gives that iridescent look. And let's shine a little bit more light over here on the subject. There we go. See how it gives that nice iridescent look? And that way, I'm not going to have to put any cameras inside there. I'm still going to get that cool look that I saw in the picture. And I'm not going to have to build anything inside. And it just gives you a little bit different of an effect. Now, if you use this, you always want to put it on the inside, because you're not going to be able to tape this. You're not going to be able to mask it or, sand it. Once this is on there, you can still pull it off if you get a pair of tweezers, or you can probably pull it off with your fingernail. But if it's on the inside of the glass, I'll probably sand this all flush. That's not going to be an issue because I'm not actually touching the film. So that's what it's going to look like. I'm going to get the give me another piece here. Let's see if we can see this kind of transform right before your eyes. And that's kind of the look I was going for. So that's how you do that. Again, it's called nail foil, iridescent nail foil, or I don't know. Just look up nail foil and then look for the iridescent stuff. I know that they probably have some on Amazon and eBay. So that'd be my first place to check if you're interested in something like this. Okay, now I'm starting to glue up the sections. I've got the two outer wing sections with the engine areas. I've already got this one glued. The only issue that I ran into was there's not a lot of area to grab on in this real thin part where the intakes are. So I took some sprue goo and ran it along the inside to make sure that that's nice and solid, because I am going to have to sand this a little bit. And when you start torquing on that, if it's not secure and joined well, it's just going to split apart. What I found was best is to start on this side that comes in two halves and start with this section right here, because that's going to be, if it's off, it's going to look like that, and you know, or worse, or I just find it best to start on this side. So I'll take my Tamiya extra thin quick setting, and I'm going to get this joined up, and I'm just going to run it along in there. And I got it kind of pressed in. What I found is if you put glue down and then you try to smush them in together, you get a bunch of stuff coming out the seams, and it's just a pain in the butt, because then you got to do some sanding and it just looks messy. But if you hold them together and then just run this stuff along the inside, it works out pretty well. Now, what I like about this quick setting stuff is it doesn't seem to melt the plastic as much as the regular Tamiya extra thin. So it's less apt to squish up a bunch of plastic. Now there is this seam here, but I will take care of that with some of my Testors stuff. And it's going to be on the bottom, so it's not that big of a deal. Once I get this in here like this, I'm just going to go along, place my clothespins. Now, these old Testors kits, I've heard a lot of people say they have fit problems, but I think a lot of what that is their molding is not real clean, and you've got a bunch of this flash, I would call it flash, along the side. You just got to be cognizant of that and trim that out before. This one isn't too bad. The other one I had to do a little bit of trimming all that stuff off. But that's just one of those things when you deal with these older kits like this. Okay, I'm going to sit here and hold this. Then I'll come along the other side and do that, glue that down, and then I'll take my sprue goo and run it along and strengthen this join. You can see how thin that is right there. So I'm going to get to gluing this part. I've got the other sections. I'm gluing those together. Let me grab this one right here. What I did with this is I glued these two tail sections each into their respective. This is going to be the top. So I glued this piece into the top and then the tail section into the bottom part. And then I just mated the bottom and the top together. And that way I kind of messed up on this join. I probably should have done a little bit more trimming, but I'll end up fixing that. And then when I glued them both together, I just glued the end of the tail section here. And I am gonna, it does kind of overbite right there, but I'm gonna cut this off right about here because it's not accurate the way they have this. So I'm going to end up cutting that off and putting a couple little pieces of plastic card in there to represent what it really looks like on the real thing. And then I'll glue the front fuselage section up, and the bottom part's kind of warped, but I think it's so long, I think I'll be able to take that out of there when I glue it up. I've got my little pilots in there, you can see. And I went ahead and glued all this top piece together. This came in 3 sections, this back section, a middle section, and then the front. And then there's another little piece that goes on the front as well. But I glued all 3 of these together first and got them nice and aligned, because this is going to be the top and going to be the most seen, so that's where I want my best seams. It's better if I've got issues down here on the bottom, because it's not going to be seen as much as the ones on the top. So I got those fixed first. Then I'll come along and glue this down and be good to go. And then I can mate up this whole entire piece with the main body of the plane. So that's where I'm at.